Go. Well, of course, the war is what they want, and the vicious war in Ukraine continues. Utterly sickening if you get into the detail of what's happening on the ground. I've chosen some video clips so that our audience at least understands the basic of what's happening. And this first one demonstrates two things. We've got an attack on a train, but also there's the clarity of the surveillance video from the drone. And Russia is able to do this ever deeper into Ukraine. So a military train with armoured vehicles, and Russia strikes this with a massive missile strike of course, very precise accuracy. So this is the reality. Russia is now able to look deeper into Ukraine and to target this sort of thing. And this is the second big military convoy train that the Russians have hit, destroying a large number of people and also a large number of Ukrainian military with it. Secondary explosions going on in this clip. But then also we've got the change in Russian weapons and these incredibly large Russian bombs up to 3,000 kilograms. And this shows you what almost looks like a nuclear cloud. This is such a huge explosion. And using these immensely accurate weapons, the Russians can simply remove Ukrainian supply bases or ammunition depots in one strike. But smaller bombs are also being used to flush out Ukrainian troops in the hedgerows that form the defence lines in many cases when the fighting has moved to countryside areas. The only places that the Ukrainians and indeed the Russians can hide are these tree lines, but it's the Russians that have got these immensely powerful weapons to deal with the Ukrainian positions. So the Ukrainian casualties you can just watch happening on screen. And this is another example of what happens when these sorts of weapons hit these very narrow tree lines. And there's no doubt that the majority of the Ukrainians are going to be dead rather than injured. But we've also got precision artillery on the Russian side, and throughout the battle, the Russians have demonstrated a great advantage in numbers. So if we just play this clip here, this shows what happens with a precise strike on a building. This is in a small urban area, where, of course, the Russians are looking to take out again concentrations of Ukrainians, but also the military supplies. And if we bring this one in, some of our viewers may find this one disturbing. This is happening to both sides, both the Ukrainians and the Russians. But this is the use of drones to hunt individual soldiers on the battlefield. Very cruel and callous, and particularly with the idea that Western nations are watching this happen in order to increase their own performance in this field. So we see here video taken with, I would guess, infrared camera at night. But these are troops being killed by a distant observer operating the drone. And this is why NATO and the Western countries at the moment are so desperate to get in amongst this conflict, because it is so utterly horrific and brutal. But the power of the drones, of course, isn't just against troops. We've also got a fine example here of what happens with a Russian drone attack on a Ukrainian tank. And of course, we're seeing complete destruction of this particular tank with no survivors whatsoever. The Russians are also using cluster munitions. Remember, it was the Ukrainians that first used these munitions within the rockets supplied by the West. But the Russians have been particularly using this sort of weapon on wooded areas to flush out the Ukrainian defenders. And in many parts of the eastern Donbass front, extremely large areas of woodland have now been decimated as a result of the use of these types of cluster munitions. And if that shot is taken from some distance, then this clip shows what happens when these sorts of weapons are used on the forest strips, which, as I've already said, often form strong defensive positions. And the resulting fires and carnage is truly horrific. So this is the reality of the of the situation on the front. And of course, none of this is being reported either by the media in the UK, especially the BBC or the British Ministry of Defence. We are simply told that the Ukrainians continue to win when the reality is the exact opposite. But Ministry of Defence Twitter site, X, came up with a new plan because we're back on really Russians eating babies. This is extremely unpleasant little clip because I regard it as pure propaganda, but let's have a look at it.
Rape requires no training, no armory, no financial backing, but is as devastating as bullets and bombs.
So depressing, miserable music by the British Ministry of Defence as it attempts to pin sexual war crimes on the Russians. These are, of course, just reports that have been made through the Ukrainian government system. But if we bring up on screen the real level of casualties, now we can't be absolutely sure where we've got to, but we're pretty confident these are somewhere in the region because of the number of channels reporting it. Ukrainian dead, possibly up to around 500,000, and daily casualties, certainly over the last few weeks as the fighting is now erupting right the way across the front as Russians move forward, up to 2,000 Ukrainian casualties per day. For the Russians, possibly dead at 100,000 and casualties possibly up to 1,000 a day. But the reality over the course of the war so far, rapidly approaching 900 days, is that the Ukrainian casualties in dead and wounded greatly outweigh the Russians because of the Russian strength of equipment. And if I just bring in this truly horrible little bit of propaganda by the Ministry of Defence against those casualties of men and women on the battlefield, the important thing for the Ministry of Defence is 287 claimed conflict-related sexual assaults or violence in Ukraine pointed at the Russian side. So I just want to say, Mike, the cynicism of the UK at the moment in keeping this war going and keeping fighting until the last Ukrainian is truly appalling. And I'm sure there's many old Labour supporters who are now deeply shocked to see that Keir Starmer wants to keep this carnage going.
And we should just make the point again, as we made last week and in previous programmes, sexual violence is a weapon of war. Can't be a weapon of war if there isn't a war. So surely the first thing to do is to stop the war instead of trying to use it to justify the continuation of the war, which is really cynical. Okay, if you like what the UK column does, you would like to support us, the place to go is support.ukcolumn.org. There are options to help us there. We do need your continuing support. Membership is £5 a month, and that really does help us. Thank you very much to everybody that is a member or contributes in another way. As we've mentioned many times, the algorithm is against us, so we need everybody to become the algorithm and share our material everywhere you can. The best place to find it in the first place is ukcolumn.org or ukcolumnextracts.co.uk. You could pick something up at the UK Column shop. Lots to have a look at there, and of course your life in their hands,
which I'm going to keep asking for every person who's a member of UK Column to buy. I will put some up in future news editions, but we've had a number of very nice emails from people talking about the quality of this publication and saying how good it is. So if you haven't purchased one yet, please do, because it's good material, it's good value, and it really helps the UK column. Now, just on the subject of Trump, I think that some people might be unaware that J. Michael Waller did two really good interviews with me, specifically talking about problems with the security services in the United States, and that includes the CIA and the FBI, and he's talking about the breakdown in performance. So if you haven't seen those interviews, get online and have a look, because I think they're highly pertinent to the assassination attempt on Trump. And coming out tomorrow, the 16th, 1 o'clock, we've got my second interview with Dr. Michael Nels, where he's talking about Alzheimer's and what people can do in order to stay fit and healthy and to keep their mental capacity until mature years. So this is something which will be of value to all of us. And I'd also like to say that John Bodwin, who is an American who's produced essentially an algorithm which is able to process death data in the States, has obtained 1.4 million death certificates, which he's now able to process. And at 1 o'clock on Thursday, that's this coming Thursday, there's an interview with John and Debbie Evans where he's talking about the amazing work he's doing to expose what is really happening to people's health in America. And I'd also like to say, make sure you get that Saturday the 19th of October this year in your diary, for a location in Bristol, still to be announced, which will be UK column appearing really, really, really live. And
Yes.
we'll look forward to meeting you all there.
Okay.